I want to start today by asking you to tap into a feeling. And I don't mean some vague, abstract emotion. I mean a very specific, almost physical sensation that I think everyone listening is going to recognize.
Mm.
It's that initial rush, that sudden click of being seen. You meet someone new, maybe a partner, a friend, a mentor, and all of a sudden it's like the lights go on. You're not invisible. You feel understood, interesting, like you're finally vibrating on the same frequency as someone else. It's a relief, isn't it?
Oh, it's massive. And it's not just, an ego boost. It's a fundamental human need.
Hmm.
We crave that alignment. When someone looks at us and that look has weight, it feels like we exist in a more solid way. It
Yeah, it
validates our
does.
reality.
It feels like you've come home. But, and here's the twist for today's deep dive, what if that feeling is actually a trap? And not a malicious trap, not a scam or a game. I mean something much subtler, much harder to escape, and honestly, much more heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Today, we are doing a deep dive into a truly haunting essay by the philosopher and writer Pedro Malha. It's titled, Being Seen Only Where It Suited Them.
This is a heavy one, and I've read a lot on relationships. But this piece, it just does something very, very difficult. It puts language to a specific kind of loneliness that I think a lot of us have felt, but never quite knew how to name.
Right. It's about those connections, romantic, platonic, whatever, where the feeling is undeniably real, but it has these invisible borders.
Hmm.
Pedro Malha calls it partial recognition. And honestly, reading the source material, it felt like someone was just going through my old diaries with a highlighter. It was uncomfortable. So our mission today is to really take this apart. How does it happen? Why do we accept it? And what does it do to us in the long run?
And I think it's crucial we set the tone right at the start.
Yeah.
Malha is not interested in villainizing people. This is not a deep dive about narcissists or manipulators. If you're looking for a reason to hate your ex, this probably isn't it.
Right.
It's about a much quieter, more common tragedy. The gap between our need to be fully known and someone else's capacity to only know the convenient parts of us.
So let's get into the mechanics. Mala starts by describing how this all begins. And the scary part, for me, is that it doesn't start with a red flag. It starts with that warmth we were just talking about. He writes that this kind of recognition arrives without announcing its limits. What does he mean by that?
Well, think about it. It doesn't present itself as partial. Nobody sits you down on a first date and says, hey, just so you know, I'm only going to get you on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and only when you're being funny.
Right.
In the beginning, it just feels like general warmth. It feels like total alignment. Mala's point is that being seen isn't usually a precise thing at first. It's just a feeling that something in you has been registered.
And because we're so hungry for that, we don't look for the boundaries. We don't read the fine print. Mala has this great line. Something like, the human need to be noticed does not come with fine print. We just take the feeling and run.
We do. But here's the concept I really want us to chew on, because it's the hardest part to grasp. He calls it the realness paradox. He makes this really important distinction. He says, the parts of you that were seen were genuinely seen. This isn't fake.
See, that's the confusing part. That's where I get stuck. Because if someone was faking it, the mask would slip eventually, right? You'd catch them in a lie. You'd realize they were just mirroring you, and you'd be like, okay, you're a fraud, I'm out.
Exactly. You'd have an exit.
Yeah.
But here, the interest is authentic.
So there's no trick.
There's no trick. That's why it's a trap. If they love your ambition, they genuinely love your ambition. If they're charmed by your humor, they are genuinely charmed. The problem, as Mala explains, comes later. You realize the recognition traveled along these paths of convenience.
It stopped.
It stopped exactly where you became inconvenient or complex or needy. It's not that what they saw was a lie. It's that they stopped looking the moment the view got difficult.
The moment it would have required work. I love the imagery he uses here. He says the recognition stops where you need to be held in ways that did not suit the rhythm of the encounter. That is such a polite, devastating way of saying, I only like you when you're easy.
Suiting the rhythm of the encounter is the key phrase. And think about it. At first, that selectivity is actually flattering. It usually highlights your best qualities. You're seen as sharp or warm or intriguing. You're the exciting new thing in their life.
Right, you become a character. You're the manic pixie dream girl who brings chaos, or the stoic wise mentor, or the fun party friend. You're a trope.
Precisely. You fit into the story they are already living. You become an enhancement to their reality. Malha writes that you become a place they can visit without rearranging their lives.
Ooh, without rearranging their lives. That hits hard. So you're basically a vacation destination, not a home.
That's a great analogy. You're a destination. And think about how we treat vacation spots. We love them, we take photos, we rave about them, but we don't deal with their plumbing issues.
Or their local politics, yeah.
We enjoy the view, and we leave when it rains. Malha says that in these relationships, you're recognized in moments that don't ask the other person to stretch. This creates what he calls the illusion of intimacy.
The illusion of intimacy. Okay, so how does that differ from actual intimacy? Because it feels intimate when you're sharing secrets or laughing until 2 in the morning. That feels real.
It does feel real, yeah. Malha points out that they notice details about you, maybe your obscure taste in music or how you analyze a problem, and that precision feels like care. But he writes that this language of recognition borrows the forms of depth without asking for its obligations.
Borrows the forms of depth without asking for its obligations. Wow. That is such a heavy line. It looks and sounds like deep connection, but there's no commitment to the messy stuff.
Correct. Real intimacy implies an obligation to the whole person, to the boring parts, the sad parts, the ugly parts. Partial recognition enjoys the form of depth, the late-night talks, the emotional intensity, but it checks out when the bill comes due. It wants the aesthetic of connection without the labor.
And because it feels so good to be seen, even partially, we don't question it. We just unknowingly enter a contract where we agree to be the version of ourselves that fits their limited capacity.
And that brings us to what I think is the most insidious part of this whole dynamic, the adaptation. Because, let's be clear, the other person isn't usually saying, don't be sad around me. They're not giving you orders.
Right, it's not a dictatorship. They're not handing you a script. So how does it happen? How do we end up editing ourselves if no one is asking us to?
It happens through silence. It's a quiet narrowing. Malda describes it as a learning process. You learn, without being told, which versions of yourself keep the connection open and which ones create distance.
So it's like operant conditioning, like training a puppy. You make a joke, they laugh, they lean in, dopamine hit, you talk about your anxiety, they check their phone, or their eyes glaze over, the conversation just stalls.
Exactly. And that silence is a powerful teacher. You realize, oh, okay, that part of me isn't welcome here. So you hold back the moods that don't fit, you start self-editing. And Mala emphasizes, and this is so important, this isn't deception. You aren't lying.
That's an important distinction because it feels like lying, doesn't it? It feels like you're being fake or manipulative, like I'm just pretending to be happy so they'll like me.
But the intent isn't to trick them. Mala argues you're trying to survive. You're trying to remain in contact with something that once felt meaningful. He writes that absence is louder than selectivity. Given the choice between a partial connection and no connection at all, most of us will choose the partial one. We accept the crumbs because it's better than starving.
We prioritize the connection over authenticity. But there's another layer here, right? Mala suggests we might actually like the crumbs on some level, or at least find them safer.
This is the part of the essay that really stops you in your tracks. The paradox of safety. We say we want to be fully known, fully exposed. I want someone who sees my soul. But do we? Really? Because full exposure is terrifying. Malha suggests that partial recognition can feel safer because it creates a limit on risk.
A limit on risk. So if they only see 50% of me, I'm only putting 50% of myself on the line.
Exactly. It's a container. If you're only seeing where it suits them, you aren't required to put everything on the table. It protects you from total rejection. Think about it. If they reject the fun, easy version of you, it hurts, sure. But they haven't rejected your deepest insecurities. You never showed them those.
Wow. So we stay in these relationships because the ceiling they put on us also acts as a kind of shield. It limits the depth, but it also limits the potential blast radius if things go wrong.
Malha writes, the relationship did not collapse under the weight of what could not be held. It simply never went there. That's the trade-off. You avoid the catastrophic breakup, but you pay for it with a slow, quiet erosion of your own self.
Let's talk about that erosion, the aftermath. Because these relationships usually don't end with a bang. There's no screaming match where you yell, "You never truly saw me."
No, movies have trained us to expect that explosion. But Malha says the aftermath is quiet. It settles in as a subtle distortion. And this is where the psychological toll becomes really clear. When it's over, or even while you're still in it, you're left with this very confusing residue.
He talks about a doubling, right? Can you explain that? Because that part of the essay felt a little abstract to me.
Yes, the doubling. It's the conflict between two realities. You feel both valued and diminished at the same time. And Mulhausen says both statements would be incomplete. You can't say you were unseen because they did see you. They saw your talent or your wit. But you can't say you were known. So you're holding these two competing truths. I was special to them, and I was nothing to them.
It's like wearing a costume that someone told you looked great. And after a while, you take it off and you wonder, wait, is that what I actually look like? Or was that just the lighting?
That is a perfect analogy. Mala writes that the parts of you that were highlighted start to feel exaggerated or hollow, like they belong to a context that no longer exists. You start to wonder if those best parts are even real, or if they were just shaped by that specific person's attention.
You feel like a performance of yourself.
Mm-hmm. And then there's all the stuff they missed, the ordinary textures, as he calls them, the slower rhythms, the contradictions, the days you aren't funny or smart.
The things that require patience instead of fascination.
Right. And those parts weren't rejected. They were just never invited. And that leads to a very specific kind of loneliness. Mala defines it beautifully. It's not the loneliness of abandonment. It is the loneliness of having been present without being fully encountered.
Shared space without having shared the whole weather of your inner life. That is such a beautiful and a heartbreaking way to put it. You're on the same couch, but you're in totally different weather systems.
And that loneliness doesn't scream. It just settles around the edges of memory and creates this uncertainty about your own contours. You start asking yourself, which parts of me are essential? Which are optional? It becomes hard to feel the coherence of your whole self. You feel fragmented.
This brings us to the long-term impact, because this doesn't just go away when the person leaves, it changes how you approach the next person. Mala talks about a recalibration.
This is the tragedy of the residue. You begin to wonder if being seen in fragments is all that exists. You question if wholeness is an unrealistic expectation. You start to suspect that maybe you're asking for a fantasy. Maybe nobody actually sees the whole weather system.
And that cynicism, I guess, changes your behavior. You get into a new relationship and there's a subtle bracing.
Yes, it's not even a conscious strategy. It's a reflex. You wait. You test the waters. You see what parts of you are welcome before you offer anything else. You learn to be satisfied with limited recognition because it feels familiar. It feels like this is just how it works.
It sounds like you lose your nerve. You lose the audacity to demand to be seen fully.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Mala describes it as a mix of longing and wariness. You want to be met, but you feel that quiet erosion. So you stay guarded. You prune yourself before anyone else has the chance to do it for you.
So what does this all mean? We've unpacked the trap, the mechanism, the fallout. Is there a happy ending here? Does Mala give us a 5-step plan to avoid this?
He does not. And honestly, I respect the essay even more for that. He refuses to offer a fix. He explicitly says the essay doesn't teach a lesson or point toward a better future.
That's terrifying, but also strangely validating. Like, he's not trying to sell us a solution.
It's just honest. Mala emphasizes that there are no villains here. There's no utility in hunting for motives. It doesn't matter if the other person was careless, avoidant, or just limited. The why doesn't change the texture of the experience.
That's a tough pill to swallow. We always want to know why. Was he a narcissist? Was she emotionally unavailable? We want a diagnosis. But he's saying it doesn't matter why they only saw half of you. The fact is you were only half seen.
Exactly. Understanding the motive doesn't heal the fragmentation. The lingering truth is simply that you have to live with the ambiguity. You carry both the warmth of having been noticed and the ache of having been overlooked. They coexist.
The absence does not cancel the pride. You can be proud that you were dazzling to them and sad that you were only dazzling.
And that is the final destination of the essay. It's not a judgment. It's a recognition of how powerful limited seeing can be, how it shapes us without ever raising its voice. The mark it leaves is neither wound nor gift, but something less defined.
It's just residue. It lingers like smoke.
It lingers, and it changes your definition of what being seen really means. It makes it more complicated, but maybe more realistic.
You know, usually I like to wrap these up with a clear takeaway. Go do this, don't do that. But this deep dive feels different. It feels like the takeaway is just the awareness itself. Just realizing, oh, that's what happened to me.
I agree. Recognizing the pattern is the first step.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding the initial warmth wasn't a lie, but it also wasn't the whole truth. And knowing that the quiet narrowing you did to yourself wasn't a weakness, but an adaptation.
It allows you to look back at those relationships, not with anger, but with a sort of factual sadness.
Factual sadness, I like that. It helps you stop blaming yourself for not being enough and see that maybe you were just too much for the container they provided.
Too much for the container. I think I'm
Yeah.
going to need to sit with that one for a while. That reframes the whole thing from rejection to capacity.
It's a freeing thought, isn't it? It's not about your worth. It's about their volume.
It really is. Okay, we have covered a lot of emotional ground today, from that seductive warmth of being noticed to the silent erosion of self-editing. Pedro Mala's essay is one of those pieces that once you hear about it, you can't unknow it. It changes how you see your own history.
It certainly does. It's a lens that brings a lot of blurry memories into sharp focus.
Before we sign off, we like to leave you with something to chew on, something that takes what we've discussed and just pushes it one step further.
Here is a thought to carry with you. We've talked a lot about the other person's limitations, how they only saw what suited them. But if we accept partial recognition because, as Mala suggests, it feels safer than full exposure, are we sometimes complicit in the boundaries others draw around us? Is the loneliness of being partially seen actually a shield we pick up to protect ourselves from the terrifying vulnerability of being fully known?
That is a heavy question to end on. Are we hiding behind the partial view? A necessary question, though. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.